everyone. Welcome to Elvis Presley Past, Present and Future, where we are back again for another episode of the Elvis journey. This week's movie is Girls, Girls, Girls. Plus I do have a few other things I want to get through as well as our song at the end. Could anybody guess, I wonder, what song I'll be doing from Girls, Girls, Girls? Let's wait and see, huh? Anyway, let's get into it. In the early 60s, Elvis' friends, they took on their most problematic and entertaining member, a 40-pound chimpanzee named Scatter. However, before Elvis, Scatter was a TV star on a local Memphis radio station. The program was hosted by Bill Killebrew. Somewhere, somehow, Bill acquired a cute little chimpanzee called Scatter, and he began to appear on the show, quickly becoming the star attraction. According to the press, Scatter is presented in a variety of roles and situations: a business executive, as a baseball player, as a banquet speaker, all designed to show how ridiculous some people's businesses can be. Scatter's world was incredibly popular with Memphis audiences, and any children who wrote in could become members of the Scatter Club. After about a year, Bill, who featured both Scatter and his brother Chatter on the show, wanted to pare down the act and approached Elvis about buying the chimp as a companion. But being surrounded constantly by the guys who made up Elvis's gang wasn't exactly the best environment for a growing monkey, and Scatter quickly developed bad habits. Scatter had many interesting and entertaining ways that, if nothing else was going on, everyone could always get a kick out of Scatter's antics. One of his favourite tricks was to hide in the bathroom when one of Elvis's female guests entered to use the facilities, which always created an ear-piercing scream from the female guests. Scatter also enjoyed lifting up females' skirts to peek under. Scatter loved beer and liked whiskey just as much. Among other things, Scatter ripped the curtains at Graceland, yanked up the skirts of Elvis's female visitors, and when he was in a really playful mood, tended to throw things at visitors, nasty things that made everyone scream and, well, scatter. One day, the monkey bit Vernon's new wife, Dee, on the finger. When Elvis called Bill to ask if the monkey had had its rabies shots, Bill replied, "Yes, Scatter's had his shots. Does Mrs. Presley have hers?" The chimp even went along when Elvis went to Hollywood, and that prompted Bill to complain to reporters. "I've been working with that damn chimp for 11 years. That chimp was with me for 1 year. Now he's in Hollywood. It's just a monkey's world." Kid Galahad was Scatter's first trip to Hollywood. After Scatter had bitten several of the Memphis Mafia members and no one was able to put him back into his cage, Elvis decided to have a face-to-face with the chimp. Elvis looked Scatter in the eye and, trying to keep a straight face, said, "You coconut head, you'd better get downstairs in your cage, and you'd better not bite anybody else anymore, you hear?" With his hands folded in front of him, Scatter slowly walked down the stairs and marched to the basement and into his cage. Elvis fell on the floor laughing. Elvis would wait until the den was filled with girls and everyone was really comfortable, then yell, "Okay boys, let him out." At about 4 foot tall, Scatter loved the girls. Alan had taught Scatter to look up the girls' dresses. On the first night Paddy Perry was a guest, she didn't know about Scatter, who made a beeline for her. His arms waving and screaming and trying to look up her dress. She told him to stop, but Scatter was determined to get his way with Pat. She told Scatter, "You do that one more time and I'm going to knock the hell out of you." Well, naturally, Scatter did it again, and Pat got on her knees and hit the chimp under his chin. Scatter did a backflip and landed on the couch, dazed. He looked at her in disbelief and ended up with a bump on his head the size of a golf ball. Marty Lacker said, "Scatter was with us on my very first trip across country. We had him in a cage in the back of the Chrysler station wagon. One night we checked into a motel in Flagstaff, Arizona. The chimp stayed in Alan and Lamar's room. All night long we heard Scatter just running backwards and forwards in the room. The next morning, Lamar said in a real quiet voice, 'You need to come in here and see this.' Scatter had gotten up on the drapes and had started swinging on them, and they were practically pulled down. Lamar fight continued. Just about that time, our food came. I looked out the window and I said, 'Oh my God,' the Mexican maid was just about to knock on the door. We all jumped at the same time and tried to yell at her to stop, but it was too late. Before we could even get out of our chairs, she'd walked in and closed the door to start making up the room. It was early in the morning and the room was dark. Well, you can picture what it was like for a Mexican maid to open a motel room door in Flagstaff, Arizona and find a chimp inside. Scatter ran across the room and latched onto her, and she went bananas. She started screaming the most blood-curdling yell I've ever heard. We ran over there, and God, that was the funniest sight. That maid came flying out of that room with Scatter wrapped around her like a damn boa constrictor. He jumped on her back and fastened his legs around her waist and put his hands over her eyes so she couldn't see. We peeled Scatter off her, but then he bolted out the door and went tearing out across the portico which ran over the shed in front of the hotel. He went right up the drain pipe and over the top. The maid was still screeching, and Scatter was on the damn roof, just dancing up a storm, laughing at us. Alan said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Get in your car and I'll go get the station wagon. I'll leave the back door open and the windows open, and the door to his cage ajar. Just slowly drive off." Well, that car hadn't rolled 10 feet when Scatter was on that sucker. He thought we were going to leave him. He stuck so tight to the car, he looked like adhesive tape. We'd buy little suits for him, and sometimes stick a chauffeur's cap on him and balance him on our lap. When we would pass a car, we would duck down to make it look like Scatter was driving. One guy drove right off the road. Marty, like I said, one of Scatter's favourite pranks was to lie on his back on the edge of the couch, so he was half on and half off. And when a girl walked by, he'd crook one finger under the hem of her skirt and stick his head up. He really had a thing about that. You can imagine how that went over. Scatter's behaviour eventually got so out of control that Elvis had to finally banish him to a climate-controlled room made especially for him. Scatter reportedly turned very mean, missing his previous free rein. Once when the maid Daisy bought Scatter his food, he ripped the wig right off her head. So they stuck him in an air-conditioned cage. Elvis and his friends came to the same conclusion that most chimpanzee owners and human parents arrive at eventually. That is, once something was so cute, when they got bigger, they turned into a real nightmare. as the object of their affection gets bigger. Scatter died shortly after his banishment, presumably of natural causes, but many believe Scatter, who missed being the centre of attention, died of a broken heart. It was also rumoured that one of the maids poisoned him. He lived out his days with minimal attention and even less alcohol. The chimpanzee wasn't Elvis's first exotic animal. He kept donkeys in an empty swimming pool, owned a turkey named Bowtie, and was twice gifted wallabies. On the 1st of June 1962, Anita Wood had accompanied Elvis to California while he was filming Girls, Girls, Girls. She would go to the studio with him so they could spend precious time between scenes together. However, one day, she decided she did not feel like going to the studio with him, so she decided to stay at his Bel Air property. She didn't realise it at the time, but that decision would change the course of her life. The house had a huge library, which was filled with books of all kinds. Always an avid reader, Anita decided to spend the day losing herself in the pages of a book. She came across a book that was on top of Elvis's desk. She picked it up, flipped through the pages, and noticed there was an opened letter sticking out of one of the pages with a return address in Germany. Curiosity got the better of her. She took the letter and read it. It was from a girl called Priscilla, the same girl the media had called the girl he left behind back in 1960. When he returned from Germany, he told Anita that Priscilla was the daughter of a friend who was an army officer, and that she happened to be a huge fan, and that's all there was to it. To Anita's shock and surprise, the content of the letter told a lot more than what Elvis had led her to believe. Priscilla was begging Elvis to let her see him in the USA, begging him to ask her father if she could come visit. Her father would agree if Elvis would ask him. It got Anita's mind racing. If this was just another fan letter, why would it be sitting in his office? Why would Elvis have it with him? And why would any parent let a teenage girl travel to the USA to visit a 27-year-old man, even if he was Elvis? The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. Anita always saw the good in Elvis. She never dwelled on his negative qualities for any length of time, and she always believed him to be trustworthy. Yet, they had their arguments, but they always kissed and made up. After 5 years, Anita liked to believe that she knew the real Elvis, but he's finally starting to realise that there were things going on that she didn't know or did not want to know about. Yes, she'd heard all the gossip, and yes, she knew that he was seeing other girls, but because Elvis always came home to her, she always managed to look past it. She believed none of those girls mattered to him. She was the one he truly loved and eventually was going to marry. Elvis always told her he wanted a girl who was a good girl, not easy like the others. And this is what Anita believed. But after 5 years, it was now becoming clear to Anita that Elvis was used to having his cake and eating it too. This letter that Anita saw was the last straw. When Elvis came home that evening, he kissed her and said, "Hey, little, what's up?" Anita, though she was beyond angry, would never make a scene in front of anybody. So instead, she quietly asked Elvis to come into the library as she needed to talk with him. He said, "Why, sure, baby. I'll be there in a minute, little." When Elvis came into the library, she took the letter out of the book and held it out to him and said, "Would you please tell me about this?" Elvis's nostrils flared like a bull in a ring. What are you doing looking at my letters? Anita calmly replied, This letter happens to be from a little girl named Priscilla. I read all about her in the paper when you were in Germany, and you assured me that she was just a 14-year-old fan who meant nothing to you. You told me that story time and time again, but obviously there's more to it. Anita had barely finished speaking when Elvis went berserk. He grabbed her by both arms and shoved her across the hall, where she banged up against the folding doors to his closet. He then shook her several times and said, Why did you look at it, little? Why? Why did you have to find that letter? Now Anita had seen Elvis mad before, but nothing like this. For a fleeting moment, she thought he was going to strike her. Fortunately, after a while he calmed down. He started apologising and kept on with his story about Priscilla being just a fan, and it was nothing for her to worry about. By this point, Anita had had enough. I'm going to pack my bags, she said. I want to go home. Elvis pleaded with her not to tell anyone about the letter or Priscilla's visit to Los Angeles. Although Anita was beyond upset, she would never do anything that would hurt him. Elvis went ahead and made arrangements for her flight home. Anita had no sooner set foot in Graceland when the private line started ringing. She knew it was Elvis calling. She didn't want to talk to him. The phone kept ringing. Finally, she relented and she answered it. It was Elvis, all right. He asked about her flight, made sure she was settled, and then apologised again, and also asked her again not to tell anybody about Priscilla, saying it would ruin him if it got out. He said she really doesn't mean anything. She's just a child. You are the only one I love, little. You have got to believe me. Anita didn't know what to believe anymore, but she did promise him again that she wouldn't say anything. And other than confiding in Dodger, she didn't tell a soul. Eventually, the entire incident blew over, or so Anita thought, until one day in August 1962, it all came crashing down. Anita was coming down the back stairs of Graceland one morning for breakfast when she overheard Elvis speaking to his father. It sounded like a very heart-to-heart conversation, and she contemplated heading back upstairs, when suddenly she heard something that stopped her in her tracks. She heard Elvis say, Daddy, I'm so confused. I don't know what to do. I'm having the hardest time trying to decide between the two of them. How do I choose? Anita knew exactly who he was talking about, herself and Priscilla. Anger and her southern pride kicked in. With a deep breath, she turned and marched back down the stairs. No one was going to debate to choose between her and somebody else, not even Elvis Presley. Elvis looked surprised when she appeared down the bottom of the stairs. She looked him squarely in the eyes and said, I'm going to help you with your decision. I'm leaving. It's done. He desperately tried to work his magic on her one more time. Now, little, you just calm down, hun. Come on, in the dining room and we'll talk. No, said Anita. There's nothing to talk about. Now, little, said Elvis, you know you don't want to do this. Let's talk and we'll work this out. No, said Anita. I've made up my mind. I'm through. You don't have to make this decision anymore. I've made it for you. You can have her. Now Vernon could see that Anita's mind was made up. And knowing how close Anita and Gladys were, and how much Gladys loved Anita, and also believing that things would not work out with Priscilla, Vernon tried to impart some wisdom. He said, you know, Anita, you know, hun, sometimes if you separate, you get back together again. No, said Anita, finding back tears. That won't happen. I'm calling my brother and I'm moving away. I'm sorry it has to end like this, especially after all these years. But this is my decision, not yours, Elvis. And it's hard because I love you so very much. You are my first love, and it will be very hard to get over you. But in time, I know I will. Elvis now had tears in his eyes and was listening very intently to every word Anita had said. Not knowing what to do, he reached in his pocket and pulled out a big wad of money and tried to put it in her purse. "Don't you dare," said Anita. "I don't want anything from you." And she turned to go upstairs. She called her brother and began packing her clothes and belongings. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done in her life because she knew that she would never be coming back. When her brother arrived, he loaded Anita's things into his car. It was an emotional scene. Anita and Elvis were both crying. Her brother shook Elvis's hand and nodded. Finally, as soon as they were heading out the back door, Anita turned back to look at Elvis. "Oh, little," he said, "I pray to God I'm doing the right thing by letting you go." Anita said, "I made the decision for you, Elvis. You don't have that choice anymore. I'm going. Goodbye." She kept a brave face as she and her brother made their way down the driveway and through the iron gate. Once they left the premises, she went to pieces. She had just left Elvis Presley, the love of her life, her first love. They weren't apart for even 5 minutes and already she was missing him. For the first 3 days, Anita cried. She had moments where she just wanted to pick up the phone and call him, but she somehow resisted. She still loved him so much and wanted him back so badly, but she knew he would never change. And she would never go back. For the next 3 months, Anita went back home to live with her parents. On March 26, 1962, Elvis began 3 days of soundtrack recording at radio recorders in Hollywood. The title song, "Girls, Girls, Girls," had been written in 1960 by Leiber and Stoller for the Coasters. Elvis was not pleased with the direction of his career and the way it was headed, and wasn't pleased with the prospect of singing to a shrimp or any other sea creature. Song of the Shrimp is a soundtrack song. However, one of the classic Elvis songs came from this film's soundtrack. It was Otis Blackwell and Winfield Scott's composition, "Return to Sender." The song had not been written for this movie, but when Colonel Parker heard it, he knew it would be perfect for Elvis, and he made sure that Elvis had heard it as well. And in the scene of the movie, when Elvis sings the song "Return to Sender," you can see in his movements the influence of one of his favourite entertainers, Jackie Wilson. With the music recorded, it was time to go to Hawaii for the location portions of shooting the film. Elvis wanted to go to Hawaii by ship, however, a strike forced him to fly. The decision placed the production behind schedule. Later, when Paramount sent a check for 2 extra days of Elvis' time, Colonel Parker refused the payment, as it had been Elvis's reluctance to fly that had caused the filming delay. The check was never cashed. On April 7, 1962, Elvis and his entourage arrived in Hawaii on Pan Am Flight 817. Elvis then took a helicopter ride to the Hawaiian Village Hotel, where he would stay. Approximately 8,000 fans were on hand for his arrival, and in the 100-yard walk between the helicopter and the hotel, he lost his yachting cap, his jewelled tipped tie clasp, and a diamond ring that he especially liked. The next day, a young girl called the hotel and said that his ring had come off in her hand and that she wished to return it. She was told to leave the ring at the front desk of the hotel, which she did. Girls, Girls, Girls was Elvis's 11th movie, and the film received in 1962 a Golden Globe nomination in the category of musical comedy. The movie was the second of 3 films Elvis shot on location in Hawaii. Hal Wallace took Elvis back to Hawaii to film the location scenes. Such colourful scenery was a staple of Elvis movies in the early 1960s, though the Hawaiian setting of Girls, Girls, Girls was never mentioned in the film. The movie is very much in the mould of Blue Hawaii, Elvis's blockbuster hit for Wallace and Paramount the year earlier. The working titles for Girls, Girls, Girls had been A Girl in Every Port, Welcome Aboard, Jambalaya, and Gumbo Yaya, which is said to be a Creole expression for everybody talks at once. The story was written by Alan Weiss, who also worked on Elvis films Blue Hawaii, Fun in Acapulco, Paradise Hawaiian Style, Easy Come, Easy Go, and Roustabout. The formula was simple, unpretentious, light musical comedy with plenty of Elvis's musical numbers. There was one major difference. Elvis is no longer surrounded by experienced actors. In most of his previous film vehicles, Elvis had been surrounded by a strong supporting cast. King Creole and Kid Galahad are two examples of how experienced co-stars helped enhance Elvis's performance and provide his films with credibility. With Girls, 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 however, the weight of the film relied on Elvis's shoulders. Ending the strategy of using Elvis as a part of an acting ensemble meant that Elvis movies from now on would be aimed basically at his loyal fan base and not to a wider audience. Hal Wallace Productions, directed by Norman Taurog, puts the entertainer back into the non-dramatic, purely escapist light musical vein. For Girls, 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 Elvis had obviously trimmed down his weight considerably from his appearance in his previous two films. Also, he seemed to have gone overboard on the Brylcreem for his latest film. Not even a South Sea hurricane could have moved his hair on his head. Principal photography began on April 9, 1962. Shooting in Hawaii included locations such as Bumblebee Tuna Plant near Waikiki Beach and the Alloway Yacht Harbour. At this time, Elvis was very much into karate and actively practicing breaking up 40 boards a night. Hal Wallace put an end to that for the duration of the production for the fear that Elvis would break his hand and hold up the production schedule. On April 26, 1962, location shooting was finished. After shooting in Hawaii, filming resumed on May 1, 1962, back in Hollywood at the Paramount Studios Stage 5 until May 16, 1962. On weekends, Elvis and the guys would play football in the local Denevin Square Park with friends and other actors such as Ty Harden, Bob Conrad, Ricky Nelson, Pat Boone, Gary Crosby, and Max Baer Jr. The plot of the movie: Elvis plays Ross Carpenter, a Hawaiian fishing guide and sailor who enjoys boating and sailing out on the sea. When he finds out his boss is retiring to Arizona, he seeks to find a way to buy the West Wind, a boat he built with his father. Ross is caught in a love triangle with two women: childish, insensitive club singer Robin, who's Stella Stevens, and sweet Laurel Goodwin. When Wesley Johnson, played by Jeremy Slate, makes advances on Laurel, Ross punches him out. Wesley owns the boat, so Ross thereby loses it. Laurel, however, is not who she pretends to be. Ross has to choose between her and Robin. Stella Stevens was born Estelle Eggleston on October 1, 1938 in Yazoo City, Mississippi, the only child of Thomas Elliott Eggleston and his wife Dovie Estelle. One of her great-grandfathers was Henry Clay Tyler, an early settler from Boston, and a jeweler who gave up the Yazoo City courthouse cupola its clock. When Stevens was 4, her parents moved to Memphis, Tennessee, where they lived on Carrington Road near Highland Street. Her father was an insurance salesman and her mother was a nurse. Stevens attended St Anne's Catholic School on Highland Street and Sacred Heart School on Jefferson Avenue, finishing her final year of high school in 1955 at the Memphis Evening School at Memphis Tech High School. At the age of 16, she married electrician Noble Herman Stevens on December 1, 1954 in Memphis. 6 months later, they had a son, Herman Andrew Stevens, who was later known as actor-producer Andrew Stevens. He's Stella's only child. The couple divorced in 1957, but Stella and her son retained a variation of her ex-husband's surname as their professional surnames. While studying at Memphis State College, she became interested in acting and modelling. According to her official biography, her schooling in Memphis included a couple of years at Memphis State University, where she was noticed in the school play Bus Stop. In January 1960, she was Playboy's Playmate of the Month. She was also pictured in Playboy pictorials in 1965 and 1968. She was included in Playboy's 100 Sexiest Stars of the 20th Century, appearing at number 77. During the 1960s, she was one of the most photographed women in the world. In 1961, she starred opposite Bobby Darin in John Cassavet's Too Late Blues. And in 1962, she starred opposite Elvis in Girls, Girls, Girls. The following year, she appeared in 2 successful comedy films, Jerry Lewis's The Nutty Professor, 1963, as his student and love interest Stella Purdy, and in the Vincent Minnelli's The Courtship of Eddie's Father, 1963, playing the would-be Miss Montana beauty queen. In 1964, she signed a contract with Columbia Pictures. Following appearance in 1964-1968, following appearances in Synonym, 1965, and The Secret of My Success, 1965. Stevens starred as a sexy but clumsy government agent opposite Dean Martin in the Matt Helm spy spoof The Silencers in 1966. Her final film for Columbia was Where Angels Go, Trouble Follows, in which she played Sister George. In 1972, she co-starred in Irwin Allen's hugely successful disaster film The Poseidon Adventure, starring Gene Hackman, Ergus Borgnine, Roddy McDowall and Shelley Winters. Stevens played the role of Linda, the refreshingly outspoken ex-prostitute wife of Borgnine's character. In the 1990s, she continued to work regularly in series such as Newhart, 1983, The Love Boat, 1983, Fantasy Island, Highway to Heaven, Night Court, Murder, She Wrote, Magnum P.I., Father Downing Mysteries. Stevens appears in 34 episodes of the prime-time soap opera Flamingo Road from 1981-1982. In late 1976, Stevens purchased a ranch in Methco Valley near Carlton, Washington, on the eastern edge of the Cascade Mountains. She also opened an art gallery and bakery in the nearby small town of Twisp, Washington. In 1983, Stevens began a long-term relationship with rock guitarist Bob Kulick. A little over a year later, he moved into Stevens' Beverly Hills home. In March 2016, Kulick and Stevens sold her long-time Beverly Hills home, and she moved to a long-term Alzheimer's care facility in Los Angeles. She is still alive in the aged care facility, battling dementia. She's 83. About Elvis, she said, as early as 1962, she fought with the studios and famously challenged Elvis over the films he was making, becoming one of the new female stars to ever tick off Elvis. In 2004, she said, I got the script from Paramount to read and I was like, he's from Memphis and so am I. That's a good idea to put us together. So I read the script and then threw it across the room. I thought, what a piece of Heartbreak Hotel. I'm not going to sit in this. Even when the studios threatened to blacklist her, Stella wouldn't flinch. She said, "I will starve. I don't give a hoot. My child will starve because of you, and we will die because of you, because I will not do this Heartbreak Hotel." So they said, "Please reconsider." And they promised that her next movie would be with Montgomery Clift. So she said, "Oh, well, okay, I'll take the Elvis picture. It's only 6 days of work, and then I'll be able just to forget all about it." In a 1967 interview, Stella said, "One day, I looked at Elvis, and I said to him, 'Elvis, honey, why are you doing this nonsense?' He thought and said, 'Don't beat luck, Stella.'" Anyway, never play in an Elvis movie. His fans just come for the purpose of seeing him alone. They don't watch anyone else on the screen, only Elvis. In the 1960s, Stella was still relatively cautious in interviews, but she later opened fire with both walking on the film directors Norman Turog and Elvis himself. In 1994, she said, "What I can remember is Turog yelling at me in front of the cast and crew. It embarrassed me in front of everyone. I've never been spoken to or ever treated like that in my life." Stella claimed she received little support, including from Elvis. He also showed me what he called his Bible, his book of colouring pictures of every pill and capsule ever made and sold by pharmaceutical companies. Taking pills seemed to be his main interest. You can speculate about the actual reason for her negative statements about Elvis, maybe because he wasn't showing her the interest from which she was hoping. You can make up your own mind. Laurel Goodwin was born in Wichita, Kansas on August 11, 1942. She later moved with her family to San Diego and then San Francisco. As a child model, Laura made her film debut in Girls, Girls, Girls. The actress also starred in the original pilot for Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek, titled The Cage. She also played roles in some comedies. These included the role of Phoebe in Chef's Niece in the comedy Get Smart, and the role of Stella in 2 episodes of the Beverly Hillbillies, Robin Hood and the Sheriff and Robin Hood of Griffin Park, both in 1967. After retiring from acting in 1971, Goodwin pursued a career in home nursing, which she did for over 35 years. When her husband became ill, she began taking care of him full-time until he died about a year and a half later. Laurel died in Cathedral City, California on February 25, 2022, at the age of 79. So that was just 3 months ago, guys. Laurel passed away. In an interview, she recalled, "I had no romance with Elvis, but we became good friends. I learned an attitude of relaxation from him and not to take the stardom too seriously. It helped me to keep my balance. I think I owe a great deal to that alone." She also said, "When I learned I was going to do the role, I was a little hesitant, startled, stunned, and nervous. Elvis helped me relax during weeks of shooting on location in Hawaii and doing interiors on the Paramount lot. He was extremely kind and loving towards me. Fortunately, we were involved with a lot of dialogue and scenes right away. He put me at ease immediately. It wasn't like working with a phenomenon, but just with someone who was doing a job. It was fun because he was informal as well and considerate. A couple of times he'd take the brunt of something that went wrong instead of letting the blame fall on a small person. He was like a big brother to me and very protective. During the filming, a boyfriend of mine started to give me a hard time, but without telling me, Elvis stopped the trouble by sending a member of his entourage to tell my boyfriend to cool it. He was really a shy person. He would feel much more comfortable if I were behind the camera while he was singing and dancing. My most reassured memory of filming Girls, Girls, Girls with Elvis is when Elvis came off camera. We used to play touch football between scenes and we would have great fun. There were photos taken of us playing football. And when they were developed the next day, Elvis picked up this photo of me, in which I was looking absolutely dreadful, messy and sweating. He said to me, "Isn't this a gorgeous leading lady?" He definitely had a sense of humour. One filmed sequence in Girls, Girls, Girls might have made a distinct impression on Laurel, but if so, she was discreet enough not to mention it in public throughout the years. For a complex paso doble dance scene with Laurel, Elvis wore black pants. The black trousers were made for the scene. Amid the vigorous movements the scene required, Elvis's pants began to rub him the wrong way, producing an unscripted physical response. At one point during the sequence, Elvis and Godwin embraced tightly, so it's very likely that the actress noticed what had happened. Elvis hoped that either the dark slacks or the film editing process would disguise the awkwardness of the scene. No such luck. The cause of Elvis's embarrassment is plainly evident in The Walls Have Ears sequence in Girls, Girls, Girls. Laurel Goodwin participated in what may have been the most bizarre scene in all of Elvis's 31 Hollywood films. She expressed her regret that Elvis never found the happiness in his life that she had found in hers. "I sensed a deep sadness inside him," she concluded. "He was such a phenomenon, and he could never outgrow it." The world premiere of Girls, Girls, Girls occurred in Honolulu on October 31, 1962, and opened nationally on November 21, 1962. In review, the Variety reviewers said in November 7, 1962, that this film put Elvis back on the non-dramatic, purely escapist light musical vein. Essentially, Presley plays himself in the breezy sea session. He handles the role capability very well, though one would hardly expect a hardened fisherman to be as soft and smooth as the one Elvis depicts. The character has little depth, but he is pleasant. Girls, Girls, Girls is just that, with Elvis Presley there as the main attraction. The thin plot, scripted by Edward Anhalt and Alan Weiss from an original story by Weiss, has him the romantic interest of two girls. Laurel Goodwin, who makes an auspicious screen debut, has the cute homespun potential of Doris Day. Stella Stevens, however, is wasted in a standard role as a sultry torch singer who has given up ever really nailing the guy. She does her best, but aside from singing 3 songs in a style suitable for the character, there just isn't enough for her to do in this movie. The Monthly Film Bulletin wrote in a fairly positive review that the songs were strung very pleasantly on a storyline of disarming simplicity and bedded comfortably. Margaret Hartford of the Los Angeles Times called it no better or no worse than previous Elvis epics. Elvis was paid $175,000 for his role, just over a third of the amount he received for his 2 previous film engagements. Elvis's career as an actor is ignored. Not just dismissed or mocked, but ignored. Between 1956 and 1969, Elvis appeared in 31 feature films. Girls, Girls, Girls remained the only Elvis movie to receive the honour of a Golden Globe nomination. Elvis came in second as Best Actor of the Year at the Exhibitor Laurel Awards, but sadly losing to Rock Hudson. It is really no wonder the studio executives found no reason to change the formula in the future. Their status as pure and simple entertainment vehicles would still result in some real success, especially during those times when Elvis himself was inspired by the material, be it the script, the songs, or a bit of both. There are definite highs and lows for the remainder of his movie career, but Elvis' creative aspirations were shunned aside, and he often felt as trapped as he did by his fame. So there you go. He's doing the films, but he doesn't want to. That's bringing in money. So, I mean, let's face it, he wasn't allowed to do anything else. Colonel was knocking back other roles. He had a contract. He had to fulfill this contract. So it's either he did it or he didn't. So he did them. Well, the song that I am going to do this week, there were 13 songs that Elvis performed in Girls, Girls, Girls. And I'm not going to be predictable this week. The predictable song from this movie would be Return to Sender. I'm not doing it. I actually found another little song in this movie that is absolutely beautiful. And I'm sure once you see it, you will remember the song. The song I'm doing is When a Boy Like Me Meets a Girl Like You. Okay. This song was recorded on March 20. These songs were recorded on March 26, 27, and 28. And this was actually recorded on March 27. Okay. All the songs on Girls, Girls, Girls album were released on the album of the same name on November 9, 1962. And this particular song was listed at number 6 on that album. So let's get into it, and I hope you enjoy.
And I touch your hand, a boy like me meets a girl like you, then I must believe wishes come true. I just look at you and I touch your hand, and this ordinary world becomes a wonderland. There are many I have met before, but I passed them by because I knew there would be this magic moment, one to last a lifetime through, when a boy like me meets a girl like you.
I like you.
I don't know why.
There you go. That song I love. I think it's a beautiful song. I actually rate Girls, Girls, Girls. I would say would be in my top 15 for movies. It's available everywhere. As usual, you can get Girls, Girls, Girls just about anywhere. Guys, I hope you all enjoyed Girls, Girls, Girls and the story of Anita and Scatter. Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment what you're thinking of our Elvis story and what you're thinking of the movies. You will have a good week, and I will see you all next week. Take care. Bye.